Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today we are going to share scary Wendigo horror stories. First story. I encountered a Wendigo while making a remote border crossing. We got crows back at home. In my town, we see them every day, sometimes solo, sometimes in a group. I am well aware that a group of crows is referred to as a murder, but despite this ominous label, they're pretty shy and generally fly away at the first sign of danger. But the pair of big blackbirds circling the point across the lake were something else entirely. I know that around the Canadian border ravens become more common than crows, and this is what I suppose they were. But these were really big, too big, possibly bigger than an eagle. And as they circled the point, the calls they made were unnerving. Nothing like the caw of a crow. The sounds were screeching, drawn-out croaks, as though to make sure that every creature on the lake was aware of their presence. I kept quiet from my vantage point 200 yards across the bay, and the travelers I had in my charge knew enough to keep still and silent. We were 3/4 done with our journey that had begun at a clandestine location outside of Atikokan. I never thought I could become a smuggler, but here I was, tucked under ancient white pines with a man and woman who were essentially strangers to me. They watched the huge birds with me, whispering back and forth in their native language. I don't know what they were saying, but the look in their eyes showed their fear. And these people have seen things in their homeland bad enough for them to leave with nothing more than a few possessions, and then give all of their money to a stranger who arranged for me to take them through the wilderness to cross the most remote section of the largest unguarded border in the world. Traveling by canoe along a route that my ancestors have traveled since long before there was a border, we had crossed the imaginary line last night, and by this time tomorrow, I planned to load them into a van that would be waiting at a trailhead near Ely. This was where we would part ways. For now, we were preparing to break camp at a campsite, known only to me. I carved it out of the timber a few years ago, and it is able to conceal not only a tent, but a canoe as well. There's not much canoe traffic this time of year, but I was doing a final check to make sure the coast was clear when the birds showed up. Figuring there must be something along the shore holding their interest, I fished my binoculars out of my pack to get a closer look at the sinister pair. To the naked eye, it looked like a typical rocky point on a shield lake. A smooth rock shoreline gave way to a stand of sparse bulrushes with a couple of boulders. One of the boulders didn't look right. I realized that I was actually looking at a dead moose that had floated up there, likely a casualty from a moose season that ended the week before. That explained why the pair of birds were circling, and I pulled the binoculars away to study how the birds were behaving. They took turns swooping down low over the moose and then soaring higher than the treetops and letting out their disturbing calls. Then there was movement in the trees. I pulled the binoculars back up and focused in on the mix of birch and fir that was along the shoreline. At first, I thought it was a bear coming down to take advantage of the dead moose. But this was far taller than a bear. Then I saw the antlers. Some smaller trees parted, and then what at first I thought was a moose stepped to the water's edge. I've seen hundreds of moose in my time up here, but what I was seeing now didn't make sense. Sure, it had antlers, and it was tall like a moose, but it was mostly without fur, and the color was all wrong, more of a sickly pinkish gray than the dark brown you would expect of a moose. I could see its ribs, and its front legs weren't really legs. They were more like long, gangly arms. Arms that ended in long, bony fingers. Even though I was about 200 yards away, I could see the glint of fangs. It stepped from the trees to the water's edge. It paused and looked up at the circling birds. It let out a scream that hung in the air. One of my travelers let out a whimper, and I turned, put a raised finger across my lips. I knew we were out of sight of what any typical animal or person could see, but this was far from typical. I flashed back to many years before when I stared wide-eyed at my grandfather as he told stories around the campfire. Flames flickered and birch logs crackled as he described an evil spirit called the Wendigo. Many generations ago, a lost hunter turned to cannibalism to survive, and his evil deed transformed him into a horrific beast. A beast that roamed the wilds with an insatiable hunger for flesh, human or otherwise. While this story terrified me as a child, I never gave it any thought as an adult, as the elders had many tales of spirits and such. But here I was, miles from a nearest road, two strangers in my care, looking at the impossible. I subconsciously reached to feel the outline of my revolver tucked into the back of my pants. The beast had now waded into the water, and its claws began tearing at the moose carcass. It ripped off huge chunks of flesh, hide, and bone with ease, shoving them into his gaping mouth where they were crunched and swallowed. The water around the moose carcass was soon tinged red with blood, and the pair of giant birds took roost in a tall pine above the beast. The carnage continued as the creature consumed impossible amounts in minutes. I heard one of the travelers whisper Monstoro. I didn't need translation to know what it meant. They had every reason to be scared now. I've had face-to-face standoffs with wild bears, with big city gangs, with angry fathers. At least with those you have an idea of what you're dealing with. My grandfather never said how one would deal with a Wendigo. With most of the moose consumed, the monster let out another scream. I was back to looking through binoculars, which was a mistake as the beast's face and chest were covered in blood, and flesh clung to its claws. An image I will never be able to erase. Despite having consumed the better part of an adult moose, it was still gaunt in appearance. It took a last look around, and I stopped breathing when its gaze seemed to focus on our location for a moment. It slowly turned towards shore and then disappeared into the brush. This cued the blackbirds to come down for what was left. One bird rested on the moose's hindquarter and picked away at intestines. The other rested on the head and feasted on the eyes and torn open neck. After a few minutes, they flew up silently, circled over our location, and then headed in the general direction the Wendigo had gone. At least they went in the opposite direction we were headed. We sat in silence for a time, then I pulled out a map. I showed the travelers where we were, where the Wendigo had gone, and where we needed to go to complete the journey. I showed them my gun, which I had kept hidden from them until now, hoping it would ease their fears. It didn't do much to ease my fears. It was a .357 revolver, enough to stop a bear, but what would it do to a Wendigo? I suspected there needed to be some version of a silver bullet to stop an evil spirit. I gestured to them to pack their belongings, which they did quickly and quietly. I calculated that if we traveled lightly and quickly, we could be out by nightfall. I decided to leave the tent and everything else not essential. We slid the canoe down the bank, climbed in, and pushed off. The woman sat on the floor in the middle. The man was at the bow. I paddled from the stern with intensity. We had about 10 miles to the end of the lake. At the end of the lake was a portage trail of about a half-mile that would bring us to the next lake. We had done a number of portages already on this trip, and after the morning's events, I was dreading having to be on foot. There was no other way out. A light wind was at our back, allowing for relatively quick travel. The man was paddling as best he could, but it was marginally helpful at best. The woman kept her head down and did not move. Usually on this kind of trip, I try to hug the shoreline to keep a low profile, but now we were tracking right down the middle of the lake. I was making a beeline for a height of land where I knew the portage was, and we continued along in silence. The paddle down the long lake was uneventful, and it was early afternoon when we reached the portage. Once ashore, we took a short break and ate some jerky, and then it was time to make the portage. It would be easier now since I had abandoned most of the gear. On earlier portages, I had the traveler's hideout while I scouted ahead to make sure we would not meet anyone on the trail, but there was no time for that. I think they understood me as I tried to explain the importance of moving quickly and quietly. I pointed to the trail and then to the packs and paddles. They took the cue, and I put the canoe up on my shoulders, and we plodded along through the forest. It took less than an hour to get to the next lake. There was a forest fire here several years before, and the charred remains of a few old growth pine stood in stark contrast to the young aspen, birch and spruce that had grown in the void left by the fire. This lake was smaller, with many bays and points, and we were soon back to making progress in the canoe. 25, we came around a point midway down the lake. I looked to the end of the lake where we would find the next portage and stopped padding. Maybe 300 yards away was the remains of a burnt pine. Roosting in the tree were two birds. Big blackbirds. The man in the bow saw them too, and muttered something to the woman. She looked up for the first time and stifled a scream. We had to go past them to get to the next portage, so I kept paddling down the middle, not taking my eyes off the birds. As we got closer, it was obvious they were watching us too, their heads pivoting as we passed them. I kept looking back over my shoulder at them, but they held their position. I didn't know what the presence of the birds on our route signified, but based on what I saw this morning, it couldn't be good. By the time we were at the end of lake where the next portage was, I could barely make out the tree anymore. I thought that perhaps we were in the clear, but then we all heard the unmistaken sound, the same sound we heard the birds making this morning. Even though they had to be over a mile away, there was no mistaking it. The long, drawn-out croaking continued for a minute, then it was silent again. I paddled towards shore so hard that the bow slid 2 feet onto the bank. "Go! Go! Go!" I yelled. The travelers seemed shocked at my yelling, as I had not said anything to them in the few days we had been together that wasn't a whisper. They both scrambled out of the canoe, grabbed the gear, and headed up the path. I again wrestled the canoe onto my shoulders and followed. We still had another lake to cross after this portage. Then it was down a creek to where we would be picked up in a remote parking lot at the end of Forest Road. We would be early, but maybe I could get a cell phone signal and get a call or a text to the driver. Or maybe we could hitch a ride with a tourist. Any concerns of being intercepted by authorities has now taken a back seat to getting out of here and away from that thing that for all I knew was making its way south toward us. Since we were closer to an access point, this mile-long portage was well-traveled, and we made good time. The first half was up a slight incline, then it went down much more steeply to the next lake. We reached the top and paused for a quick rest. I set the canoe down to catch my breath. The crest of the trail allowed a good view of the valley ahead. It also allowed a good view of 2 huge blackbirds that were circling above the treetops. The woman was not able to stifle her scream this time, and this prompted the birds to start up with their ominous calls. In the distance, we heard another sound. It was a scream that could have only come from the horror we had seen this morning. While I felt a certain amount of responsibility to the travelers, my concern for them was waning. "You better keep up," I yelled as hoisted the canoe back onto my shoulders. I headed down the steep trail as fast as I could, and I could hear the travelers behind me, stumbling but not falling too far behind. With the canoe on my shoulders, I couldn't see if they were carrying the paddles. Didn't matter. I keep a spare strap to the supports in the canoe. The steep path made a switchback and was able to see that the man was indeed carrying a paddle and pack. The woman was crying hysterically, carrying nothing. The path here was steep and rough, with many large rocks and roots creating potential tripping hazards. The birds were circling overhead us now, their croaks echoing off the hillside. We heard the distant scream again, although this time it didn't sound so distant. It was not possible for us to move any faster, but I took care to be sure-footed. I could see we were nearly to the bottom of the hill. Once there, it would be level ground to the next lake, which was now only a few hundred yards away. I made it to the bottom of the hill where the well-worn path went through a series of large roots and then turned to dirt. Once to the dirt, I flipped the canoe off my shoulders and let it land on the hull. The travelers were coming up 50 yards behind me. I grabbed the bow of the canoe and started dragging it, hoping the man would catch up and grab the stern. I started to yell at the couple to hurry, but I was interrupted by another scream from the beast. It was coming from our right, and I could now hear branches breaking and what sounded like breathing and snarling. There was no reason to think that the lake would offer refuge from this thing, but it seemed like a better option than facing it here on the path. The man was almost caught up to me, but he stopped to see where his partner was. She had tripped on a root and was now screaming, not sure if it was in pain or terror. Probably more terror, as the Wendigo had broken through the brush along the trail and was now 50 feet behind her. She looked back at it and let out what she meant to be a scream, but came out as a yelp. The beast was on her in seconds, and it picked her up over its head and slammed her to the ground. The man dropped to his knees, watching in horror as his partner was torn apart and devoured. When he ate, I resumed dragging the canoe as fast as I could, not looking back. The beast let out another shriek. Then there was a scream that I presumed to be from the man. I try not to think about the snapping and crunching sounds I could hear from behind me. The next lake was now in sight, and even though my entire body wanted to quit, I was now running. The shoreline was sandy, and I ran right into the water, allowing the canoe to float past me. I hopped in when the back seat was even with me, and in one motion pulled the tag into the knot that held my spare paddle in place. A few quick strokes, and I was 20 yards from shore. The screams of the beast continued, and the black birds that had been watching the bloodbath from treetops now were starting to swoop around me, getting closer with each pass. The Wendigo was now on the shoreline, and it let out the loudest scream of all. It stepped in the water to its knees, but stopped, gesturing with its long arms and howling at the sky. Not knowing what to do next, I pulled out my revolver. At the end of this lake was the outlet stream that would lead me to a bridge. For the moment, I felt safer where I was. The birds were getting ever bolder, and I could feel the wind as one of them swooped in on me from behind my shoulder. It wheeled around over the bow and came right back at me. It reared back at arm's length with its wings spread and its talons coming right at my face. Taking advantage of a perfect opportunity, one pointed the gun barrel at the bird's center and pulled the trigger. Black feathers flew, and the now silenced bird landed in the water and strangely sank out of sight. The other bird flew up high and then quickly descended, coming right at me. I had the gun raised, but the bird did not offer a good target, and it flew past my head. Sensing weakness, it circled around and attacked, pecking me on the back of the head with its massive beak. I had to be careful not to tip as I tried to fend it off with the paddle. More determined than ever, the bird came back at me. I fired twice, missing both times. With 3 rounds left in the gun, I knew I'd better choose my next shots carefully. The bird came from behind me again. This time it wheeled around quickly, planting its talons on my chest and pecking at my eyes. My attempts to fend it off with a fist were not successful, and it got a hold of my eyebrow. I could feel flesh pulling away from my skull, and I pointed the gun right at it, and even though I thought the barrel was pressed right into it, I still missed. I resorted to using the gun as a bludgeon that I slammed into its neck. This had a noticeable effect. It let out a deep croak and let go its grip. I was not watching the Wendigo at this point, focused on the dark feathered assailant. I could hear it, though, as it let out shrieks and screams louder than a siren. The remaining blackbird shook up some from the pistol whipping, flew in a crooked path now, obviously having difficulty maintaining its course. I felt confident I could take it down with one of my remaining rounds. It came straight at me. I let it peck the top of my head as it went by. It circled around again, and once more I let it get me with a good peck to my temple. It made another loop around, and I was ready when it followed the same path of attack. It came right at me, and I was looking down the barrel right at the bird's head when I pulled the trigger. The raven's head disintegrated in a cloud of black feathers and blood, and the headless body landed at my feet, wings still flapping, talons still grasping. The shrieks of the Wendigo suddenly stopped. It stood motionless, staring out at the lake, not necessarily at me. I set the gun on the seat next to me. There was still 1 round left. I used the paddle as a shovel to lift the dead bird over the side and into the lake, where it too strangely sank out of sight. The Wendigo, while still a fearsome-looking beast with its face and claws covered in blood and flesh, had lost its menacing posture. I pointed the revolver at it, right at its head. I was confident I could hit it, not confident that my one remaining bullet would kill it. For some reason, I thought about the old saying that if carrying a handgun for bear protection, you should save the last round for yourself. Pretty sure the old saying applies here. I lowered the gun and watched the beast. With its long bony arms hanging at its sides, it turned towards shore, and with two big steps, it was crashing through the timber, heading away from the lake, away from me, away from my exit point. I sat quietly for a minute, trying to take all of this in. I could no longer hear the sounds of branches breaking. Was the Wendigo gone? Apparently they can't or won't swim. The ravens must act as seers or scouts for the Wendigo. Once they were eliminated, it was like a switch was flipped. I thought about the hapless travelers. I knew it was pointless to go back to where I had last seen them. What would happen to me when I left the lake? It was now late in the afternoon. I slid the revolver with its one bullet into the back of my jeans, picked up the paddle, and headed for the outlet creek. Second story. I care for cryptids. This was about 2 months after my first encounter with the skinwalker who sticks by my house now. It ran into my house with such urgency, I almost dropped the book I was trying to put away. What? What is it? I had asked, rushing to get my kit. His body stretched, and he tugged on my shirt hem with his mouth. He dragged me over to the door, scratching wildly. I hurried to open it. He took off, me close behind. The run was quick. He took me to the lake that was in the woods. I could see the top of my house barely. He ran to the edge of the water, growling. I followed him over to the water. I nearly screamed. I guess mermaids exist, HM? Of course, they don't look at all like you might think they do. They don't have long, wavy hair and beautiful scales. They have skin like sandpaper, and their scales are a dull gray. They have hair, but it's tangled and knotted. Their teeth are sharp, just like their nails. This mermaid almost scratched me before the skinwalker growled at her. I don't normally name cryptids, I let them name themselves, but this one hadn't chosen a name. I tried to find any cuts or wounds on her body, but there weren't any. All you could see were her ribs and snarling face. For the life of me, I couldn't find out what was wrong. Not till she tried to take a chunk out of me. I applauded my stupidity and turned to the skinwalker. She's hungry. I'll be back with some food in 1 second. I ran to the house, grabbed whatever raw meat I had, and ran back. When I got back, she was trying to grab the skinwalker. He was backed up on his back legs, growling. I ripped open the package and waved the meat. I caught her attention pretty fast. The swipe for it, and I let her have it. I turned away, hearing the disgusting noises behind me. I pushed down the urge to vomit and turned back around when she was done. She was licking her fingers. I gagged, watching her clean her fingers. She nodded at me and crawled back to the water. She dove in, and I quickly lost her. I'm pretty sure she's the only mermaid living in the lake. The lake doesn't go anywhere, so she's pretty much stuck there. I would drive her to the ocean, but anytime I try, she just gets out of my grasp and goes back to the water. I bought some lake fish to hang out with her, and I leave her meat every day. I've also given her seashells, driftwood, just about anything you can find in the ocean to make it feel more like home. We have a pretty good thing going even if I barely see her. I gotta go for now. There's a new cryptid gem, one of the other cryptids I care for, found and is having a rough time moving in. Maybe I'll tell the story later? Third story. The reason why I locked the door during a storm. The summer storm seemed harmless at first. It struck on a hot August night, not unlike tonight. Pretty little alerts buzzed happily on every cell phone inside the safety and sanctity of my living room. My wife, Emily, was the first one to read the emergency message aloud to the group. Flash flood warning in this area, she announced with misplaced sing-song optimism. Oh, I love watching a good storm. No sooner than she spoke, the evening sky erupted with forks of angry yellow lightning and buckets of cascading rain. 4 of us eagerly crowded around the bay window to watch. That night, we were entertaining guests at our house in the New Jersey suburbs. Emily's best friend, Diana, was visiting from the city. Unfortunately for me, that meant her annoying and arrogant boyfriend was along for the ride. Aaron was awful. I hoped the storm would save me from another one of his self-righteous sermons. I was wrong. Geez, this rain is biblical. I started, shaming myself for the bait. Noah's Ark withstood many times this rain, Aaron finished. Isn't that a fun fact? The Lord always provides. It was thankfully hard to hear his nasally voice. The gutters on our middle-class home, an admitted fixer-upper, were filling in seconds. That was about eighth on the long list of things to fix. I cursed myself again for the embarrassment that would surely follow. Well, I believe in morality. That should count for everybody, Emily countered with sass. I believe the basement might flood with this much rain, I muttered to no one in particular. Oh, gorgeous, Aaron said sarcastically. Might want to have a guy look at that, but that's dangerous if you plan on having kids in here. He continued on about having a guy for every homeowner situation, which was really just his wealthy father. I motioned for him to follow me. She met me worriedly in the kitchen. After taking 2 steps down, it was apparent that I was right about the rain. On the outside of the house, the stairs leading to the basement door are underground. In extreme circumstances, that outdoor stairwell can flood if there is too much water in a short period of time. If it floods, an avalanche of water will pour into the basement as a means to evacuate the now-filled basin of steps on the outside. In case that is hard to visualize. I took a video when this started. Here it is. The end result was that our floors were filthy and covered in inches of water. I mumbled a couple quick shits shortly after this video was taken and asked them to help me unplug the electrical equipment. In a panic, I turned off the circuit to the entire floor. The lights cut accordingly. We were left in darkness and silence. Suddenly, the only sounds were Aaron's muted voice and the angry pattering of rain. And then Emily screamed. I sloshed across the cold water and reached out into the inky blackness for her. After a chest-tightening couple of seconds, I wrapped my arms around Em's shaking cold frame, and thank God that she was all right. Call that an overreaction at this stage. But my nerves were already shot, and I thought she got shocked. What happened? Are you okay? I asked. Em gasped and caught her breath. Something swam by me. If the prospect of dealing with an insurance provider had not freaked me out already, that did. Panic built up inside my throat like a lump. We need to shovel the water out of the staircase. The drain must be clogged. I started to look for my boots, but they must have floated into the office. I'll be right back. Maybe Aaron will help me. And oh, Emily shouted suddenly. She gripped my arm so hard that there were red impressions from her fingernails. Don't go outside. It's dangerous. She was right, as always. The wind alone was sure to take down a few trees, not to mention the lightning passing through like a constant, convulsing current. Either of those things made going outside pure stupidity. The emergency alert warned people to stay indoors. I nodded and followed her out. We headed back up to the kitchen like depressed, waterlogged squeak toys. Diana was the first to greet us at the top. Look at the two of yous. Did you pop a pipe? I ignored her. So did Emily. We were pissed enough, and tolerance for their bullshit had reached an all-time low. Soon enough, Aaron rounded the corner and let out an open guffaw at our drenched clothes and hair. How's the weather down there, guys, huh? Right? I think I mumbled something about his stupid golf cap. I regret that. Especially now. Emily gasped behind me, but I didn't care at the time. He was an asshole, and he deserved it. I escaped the kitchen into the sanctity of my bedroom in search of some dry clothes. Our German shepherd, Lola, was locked in there by herself. Aaron did not like dogs. Of course, the pup seemed to be taking the tough treatment well enough. She had been quiet all night, but now that I was in there, I could see her head was stuffed under the bed. I reached out to pet her head and was greeted with a nasty snarl in return. Emily's voice echoed through the hallways and pulled me away from the dog before I could give her any concern. Oh my God, Matt, it's hailing. Either the devil was dancing on our rooftop, or she was right again. I looked outside and saw fist-sized balls of ice punch their way into the pavement on my already chipped driveway. I cursed myself, this time for leaving the car outside. I closed the bedroom behind me and joined the group back in the kitchen. Diana seemed to be following the same line of thought. Emily, the Jag is out there. That stupid car cost more than this house. Can we use your garage? She asked. Well, I guess our cars aren't in there. She shot me a knowing glance. But don't go outside, Dee. It's really unsafe. It's just a little ice water. In August, she snorted. Hey, maybe those asshole scientists are right, huh? Pastor Pete says not to trust it, though. Just another hoax. She pulled open the deck door before we could protest her anymore. This is bonkers, guys. It's freezing. You feel this? Are we still in Jersey? I did. The air was so cold that it wafted its way through the kitchen. Subconsciously, the three of us backed away from the open door just as the balls of hail in the sky shifted to pristine snowflakes. Diana, get inside now, Aaron started. I'll be right back. Han, stop, she countered from the doorway. Diana, you stupid idiot, get in this house right now. Aaron said sternly. How holy? Of course, that made Dee more mad. She slammed the door and disappeared into the growing fog. And then it was quiet. We waited for her in silence. At first it felt like only a minute. Emily was pacing back and forth while I surveyed damage to the rest of the house. A few trees seemed to have fallen in the backyard. The snow was accumulating at a record pace. In what seemed like only a couple minutes, there was already a half-foot of it on the ground. The wind whipped it back and forth to create drifts of a foot or deeper. I was watching it from a bathroom when Aaron called out for our attention. I never heard a car start. The three of us converged again by the deck door. The backyard was a backdrop of white. It was impossible to see the driveway. Did either of you hear a car? We have to go find her. Aaron continued in a growing frenzy. We cannot go out there, Emily said in a mouse-like tone. Just wait another minute. Aaron looked from me to my wife. I shrugged in his direction. To hell with you both. You belong there with your morality bullshit. Open the door. Aaron pushed him out of the way in his haste. Before he got halfway there, I grabbed him by the collar and threw him out the door myself. Then I slammed it shut. The house was then quiet again. We were left with Aaron's golf cap, thrown back inside with the wind. I was just about to remark about what an asshole he was when suddenly an enormous roar punctured through the storm. Emily and I darted to the deck window to check it out. At first, there was nothing to see. Waves of snow sheets encompassed every corner and tree branch on our property. Visibility was low. But then, in the corner of the yard, a flash of red jacket alerted my eyes to a shape moving quickly by the driveway. It was Aaron. He was trying to run across the snow, but he wasn't getting far. He kept looking behind him at something just outside my line of sight. After a few feet, he seemed to give up altogether and fall helplessly to the ground. Then the thing behind him came into focus. Oh God, oh my God, Matt, look at it. Look at it. Look at it, look at it, look at it. What is that? The snow blocked most of my view, but some facts were easily discernible. In comparison to Aaron, the creature stood at least 3 feet taller. Its back was hunched and its skin was covered in a matted, dark-colored hair. It followed our former friend lazily. There was no haste to its movement. When it caught him, it lifted him up in the air like a chew toy. The sickening crunch was more than enough for me to grab Emily and hold her eyes up against my shoulder. Neither of us needed to see any more. My first instinct was to lock the doors. Lola was barking, and that would draw attention. I knew whatever was outside would soon set its sights on the house. I grabbed Em's hand and ran to lock each lock. For once, I thanked myself for spending money on security that summer. When that was done, we huddled in the bedroom with the dog and waited it out. It was quiet again. I know, given the absolute shit show that we just witnessed outside our own house, you would think it would be panic. But Lola now knew to be silent. She took to her spot under the bed. Emily whimpered, but her voice was muffled under the covers. I watched the window. The snow was not stopping. After only an hour or so, more than a foot had piled up. There is always a stillness in nature when such a storm occurs. But there was something too still. Sure enough, moments later, the loud crunch of footsteps outside confirmed my theory. Open the door, echoed a familiar and haunting voice from somewhere in the distance. You two idiots. Open the door. Emily and Lola both cried by my side. I felt helpless. Something started to tap at the walls of the house. It ran back and forth and tapped each door and window it could find, like it was searching for weaknesses. The noise sounded like long nails clicking against the wood frames. Seemingly frustrated, the voice called out again, this time with a horrible parody of Diana's obnoxious Brooklyn accent. "Look at the two of yous. Just another hoax." The curious scratching focused on the front door. Then it turned into a vicious pounding. "This is bonkers," it screeched with a horrible, throaty laugh. It coughed. The voice was horribly disjointed as it switched behind Diana and Aaron's two very different tones. "Open the door. The Lord always provides. Open the door. The Lord always provides. Open the door, please, Matt. Open the door, please, Emily. Open the door. Open Theodore. Open Theodore. Open Theodore." Emily screamed alongside it in a hysterical, horribly wounded, yet still battle-ready tone of her own. "Go F yourself." Then she did something I had never seen her do in 5 years of marriage. She got down on one knee and prayed. The prayer was not to anyone in particular. Emma's never that religious. I could not even hear much of what she was saying through the horrible banging outside. But somehow she looked at peace. She thanked someone, anyone, for our life. She thanked them for our house and for our memories inside, for all the warm times and holidays spent around the fireside, with seasons of Netflix and cases of bottled wine. She thanked them, all of them, any and all gods that might be present on earth on that hellish evening. And when she finished, she offered them one final line. "If someone is watching what is happening to us." She started to sob desperately among the scrapes. "Please help." Something answered. The pounding receded, weakly at first. Then the great footsteps that arrived exited the same way they came. After another agonizingly silent hour, the snow started to taper and disappear altogether. Moonlight crept into the windows as the clouds receded and snow melted swiftly in the rising sun. When the morning came, the weather finally died down. Our friends were reported missing. They have not been found. Tonight is the 1-year anniversary of their disappearance. There is a warning for another severe storm. We will not be opening the door. Fourth story. There are creatures living beneath the Superstition Mountains. I don't really know where to start. I've never posted here before, and actually, if I'm honest, I only made it to get answers. I guess I'll start by saying my best friend died 4 months back while we were on a climbing expedition. His name was Patrick, and we grew up together in small-town Superior, Arizona. Contrary to its name, Superior is pretty inferior. It's small, nondescript, and just generally what you would expect of a small town in the middle of the desert. The only interesting thing about it is that several movies have been filmed there in the past, though nothing recently. It also has one other perk. It's close to the Superstition Mountains. They're about 30 minutes to an hour outside of Superior, depending on traffic and such. Before he died, Patrick and I liked to climb. When we were little, we scaled trees and had birthday parties at rock climbing places, and when we were older, we'd climb the many mountains around our hometown. So naturally, we made more than one trip out to the Superstitions. But one trip out, there was different. At the time, nothing had seemed off. Just a typical day. We'd made plenty of trips out to the mountains, so we had no reason to think that one time would be any different or any less safe, for lack of a better word, but it was. Anyways, like I said, the day it happened was in September. September in Arizona is still pretty warm, so we figured we'd go for a hike. The Superstitions were our place of choice that day. Our first mistake was taking a different trail than the one we usually did. Patrick said he had found a route to a different part of the East Side Mountains, where we'd never climbed before. It was about a mile or two off the main path we usually took. Only 2 hours into walking that trail to no avail did Patrick tell me that, oops, we were lost. We were considering just going home when I made one false step and the ground gave way beneath me, sending me plummeting about 15 feet below the earth. I had a couple of scrapes and bruises, and I'd hurt my ankle, which made me mostly unable to climb. We weighed our options with me in the hole and eventually decided that the best option was for Patrick to come down with me and find an alternate exit. Before you criticize this decision, which I now realize was idiotic, we had our reasons for doing this. The first being I couldn't climb out of the hole even with our equipment because of my ankle, and Patrick couldn't haul my weight up alone. We decided against Patrick going back for help because the walk back would have taken until dark, and the desert at night is both cold and swarmed by predators. Also, the trail we were on wasn't on the map, so more than likely would have gotten us in trouble if any of the park rangers found out. So Patrick came down into the hole with me. Upon some investigating, we realized there were other hollowed-out tunnels in the hole that lead deeper underground. So thinking that someone else had already explored this path/cave system/whatever and found an exit, we decided to follow the tunnels. The first thing we noticed down there was that the tunnels stank. There was a putrid smell in the air. I don't know how to describe it other than to say it smelled like stagnant water, the still dirty water you would find in a swamp or creek. If you've smelled it, then you know what I mean. It's an awful smell, one that smells of rotten filth. But the smell rose the question, was there water somewhere in these tunnels? In the middle of the desert, no less. Not knowing what to make of it, we continued on. The tunnels seemed to get steadily darker, and our only source of light was 2 small flashlights we'd brought in case we weren't home before nightfall. As we continued walking, sure enough, we came across a small pool of water, which was definitely the source of the nasty smell. It was a murky, greenish color, and we considered throwing one of our ropes down to see how deep it was. We didn't get a chance, though, because around then the noises began. They were subtle at first. Small little yips and chirps in the distance, so quiet that neither of us mentioned them. We didn't get much further beyond the water before they started getting louder. We got a clear idea of what the sound was then, and I swear to God sometimes at night, when all is quiet, I still hear these noises. It was almost like a clacking noise. It even sounded non-living at first. But each clack was punctuated by a hiss or growl or some other noise that was definitely the source of an animal or creature or something living. By then we were scared shitless, and we didn't know what to do. We were so far into the tunnels that going back would take us at least an hour, but we knew that we sure as hell weren't going any further. The noises got increasingly frequent, and they sounded as if they were getting closer. We started tracing our steps back, hoping to reach the hole I originally fell down. We didn't make it that far back, though, or rather Patrick didn't. A thing sprang out of the darkness and latched onto Patrick's back. He screamed, and by the time I turned around, I was a few steps in front of him. The creature was already dragging him back into the darkness. I got a glimpse of it, though I wish I hadn't. It was all white, so white that we probably wouldn't have even needed flashlights to see it in the dark. It had no eyes, like most cave dwellers, and it had a horrid mouth. A horrible, awful mouth. Imagine an anglerfish's mouth. That's what this thing's mouth resembled. I didn't see its arms or hands, but I'm guessing it had claws because Patrick left a trail of blood on the dirt as it dragged him away, him screaming and the creature screeching like a banshee. I ran after them, but a few yards ahead the tunnel split into 3 new tunnels. I tried going a little farther down each, but I didn't hear anything or see anything, so after about an hour, I gave up. I felt numb at the time. Nothing. No fear, no sadness, no nothing. My mind reasoned that Patrick was probably already dead, and that soon I would be too if I didn't leave. So that's what I did. I returned to the hole where we originally began and waited for sunrise, as it was now dark, hoping that someone on the surface would find me before the creature did. In the morning, a park ranger indeed found me and assisted me out of the hole with a team of other rangers. It turns out that they did indeed patrol that part of the mountains, because other people like me had fallen into ditches and holes, and some had even gone missing completely. Afterwards, I told them that I lost my friend in the tunnels below. They looked at me strangely and asked me what tunnels. Turns out, when they went down into the hole, the tunnels had been covered in dirt, as if they were never there to begin with. They said I had probably just dreamt it or imagined the tunnels being there at all. The desert was searched for a few weeks, and when they found nothing of note, the search was closed and Patrick presumed dead. And that was the end of it. Patrick's parents didn't want to talk about it. No one did, it seemed. No one wanted to remember him or the accident, as they called it. So I haven't had the chance to tell anyone this story until now. I'm sorry for the lack of a climax or anything like that. I'm just telling this to you exactly as it happened. 1 second Patrick was there with me, and the next he wasn't. That's the end of it. I'm sorry I don't have pictures or anything of the like. I haven't found it in me to venture back out into the desert since that day. But I didn't type this all down just to let out. If I could, I would never talk about this experience ever again, not even think about it. I need help. The thing is, I never saw Patrick die. I saw him get taken, but I didn't see him die. What if he's still down there, waiting for help, praying that someone will save him, cursing me for leaving him? It seems unlikely, but if it's true that he's still alive, what if I really am abandoning him? That brings me to my question, my reason for posting this. What do I do? Should I go back and see? Should I tell the authorities, knowing they won't take me seriously? Should I tell Patrick's parents, or just let them believe their son died in some tragic accident? I don't know. The guilt is tearing me to pieces. I just want closure. I just want answers. Fifth story, the Wendigo. It started happening when I moved into my summer cabin past Green Bay. Little things happened at first. My dogs would bark into the woods, but I would see nothing. I didn't think much of it, just that it could be a deer or mountain lion. That didn't worry me because I'm a native U.P. of Michigan native, and have had previous hunting experience. Mostly this would happen, and my dogs would growl into the woods, but then seemingly forget about to go romp around the cabin. Then came the night. As I lay in bed one night, I heard shuffling outside my window. My curtains were closed, but the window itself was open. My breathing hitched as I saw a shadow standing outside my window. Just know that the cabin doesn't have a high ceiling, so the windows are low, so I'm not sure the exact size of this creature. I lay frozen as bed as the shadow stayed there for what seemed like centuries but could only have been a few minutes. Soon, the creature the shadow belonged to shuffled away, but not without emitting a guttural growl. This happened every night for the next 3 days. It would appear, stay, and then leave. After the third night of this, I woke up and went to check on my 2 hounds, Eleanor and Chip. I walked around to the back of the cabin where they slept curled up in their makeshift dog houses. I froze and felt my stomach rise up to my throat when I reached their spot. Blood was spattered everywhere, and body parts lay strewn all over the yard. Eleanor's figure lay disfigured and torn apart next to Chip's quivering body. He, thankfully, was unharmed, but shocked and in quite a mental state. What monster would do this? I thought despairingly. No bear or mountain lion would dismember a dog like this. I knew what had done this. The creature that stood outside my window every night. The strangest thing, however, wasn't the spattered blood and gore, but the pearly white flap of skin next to my dog's corpse. Good old girl didn't go down without a fight. I picked it up and turned it around in my hands. One side was an almost translucent pearly skin, and on the other a light bluish blood, I think. I dropped it immediately and ran back inside. I grabbed my old hunting rifle and my pack, which contained some food, water, and other camping necessities. The nearest highway was due north, but 38 miles, but I wanted out of these woods before nightfall. That's when it comes. During night. In the daytime, it stays in the woods, always watching, always following. I let Chip loose, and we set of due east, where I knew a small town was less than 25 miles away. I could make it, but I would have to haul ass if I didn't want to die. Me and Chip walked for the first half of our journey, and then we ran. We made it to the town right before sunset, if you can even call it a town. There's a gas station, a motel, and a couple summer cabins by the lake. As we emerged from the woods, I heard the scariest sound of my life. The roar was deafening. And pissed off, I knew that this wasn't the end of the game this son of a bitch was playing, but for me, tonight was enough. I am now staying at the motel, where the only residents are the owner, a runaway teen, and me. As far as I know, we could be the only people in this residence. I'm scared, so scared. I can feel it watching me, waiting, hunting. If I can survive another day, I will check in. But for now, I cannot fall asleep. The deadbolts on my door will not protect me, and Chip has started to growl at the door. I have survived yet another night from this beast that roams the woods of the Great Lakes. Thank you so much for your support and input. I know many of you have been wondering why I didn't drive out of there like I had the hounds of hell on my trail. One very important detail that I forgot to mention was that I had my friend drop me off. I wanted to have a more authentic, rustic experience and to get away from the city. My friend, let's call him Mark, was supposed to drive up every 2 days to check on me, since he has a camp not too far away. Only he never showed. He dropped me off, and then he vanished. I knew something must have happened to him, because he was the type of guy you could rely on, and I had known him since first grade, and he never flaked. Even though his cabin wasn't too far away, I decided not to risk it. I knew something must have happened to him and his wife. As soon as I get some answers from this godforsaken town, I'm going back to look for him. He would have done the same for me. I tried calling him from the phone in the office of the motel I'm staying at. No answer. Back on topic, all through the night, I heard growling. At times it would sound distant, and at others close. I woke up to find long scratches on my motel door. I wonder why it didn't just tear it down and come get me. But it wants to play. I think it's because I might have woken it up. I don't know how or when, just that it's awake and coming after me. This morning, the creature left me a surprise. Eleanor's collar. It's a simple band of leather with her name inscribed on it. That is going to pay. I have to get rid of it, even if I don't survive. First it took my dog, and then my best friend. But no more. I woke up and walked around town for a bit, my rifle on my back and Chip on my side for protection. It turns out this town used to be larger, but when the stock market crashed, almost everybody left and never came back. Or so the motel owner tells me. He seems strange, though. He's skittish and is always looking off into the woods. The lights outside the motel are always on, and he keeps the doors to all the rooms locked. He's either hiding something or knows what's following me. I think it's both. I know this might sound stupid, but I might try to break in his office. There's something in there that can help me. I know it. Maybe I won't, though. I have the feeling that he could be a dangerous enemy. The kid that's here is most definitely a runaway. She cropped black hair, tons of black eyeliner, and lots of gothic black clothes. I wonder why she ran away. I don't think she knows anything. She said she hitched a ride here from a truck driver, and I don't think she's lying. Despite her efforts to look tough, she has a soft voice. She wasn't meant to be like this. Her name is Mason. Thank God she's safe, though. Who knows what could have happened with a truck driver? Yes, I know not all of them are pervs, but come on, you've seen the movies. She's staying in the room next to mine. I'm glad because I'll be able to keep an eye on her, but I'm also scared for her. I can't imagine if anything happened to her because of me and what I have awoken. My parental skills are kicking in even though I've never had children. Chip hasn't slept since we got here. He stayed up all night pacing and growling at the door. I didn't get any sleep last night. I have dark shadows under my eyes because I refuse to fall asleep. I'm pretty sure he can smell the decaying flesh of the beast that is hunting us and has killed Eleanor. I can't bear to watch him suffer. I know that he misses Eleanor. I do. My dogs are the only family I had left. Now it's just Chip and me. My father died when I was a little girl. It was on a hunting trip. They say he must have been attacked by a wild animal because his body was never recovered. I'm starting to think I might be reliving his experience. Right now, Chip and my rifle are my only source of protection. I'm going to look for sources of fire later. The gas station looks new, but the lights haven't been on and I haven't seen anybody in there. There might be gas and supplies that I can use to kill this motherfucker. That is, before it gets me. I just hope I can save myself and this little girl before it's too late. I still have no idea what woke it up. Could have been already awake. Maybe I was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. I prayed last night. Why God, why me? Why would you let a creature this ferocious and demonic be born? Why let it roam the earth? What have I done to deserve this? Why God, why? As I walked around town, I noticed none of the other buildings had scratches. Even Mason didn't hear any growling or had scratches on her doors. It's eerie. It's like I'm the only one who can see and hear this beast. Or maybe the others are just pretending. I plan on looking into this town's past. They have to have had something to do with this creature. It's impossible that they haven't. I need to rest, but I am too afraid to close my eyes. I am afraid of what will come and slit my throat in my sleep, of what will devour me, bones and all. I am slowly being driven insane by the utter madness of this situation. I can't take it anymore. I need this to end, and I'm going to be the one to end it. I don't know how much more of this madness I can take. I thought I had it all figured out. Turns out IT's smarter than I think, than anyone thinks or could possibly imagine. What could I possibly have done to wake this beast? I am writing to you in hopes that one day someone will be able to kill it. I don't know if I can, if I am smart or strong enough. Last night was the worst night so far. It finally fed on human flesh. For the last 2 days, I have been trying to figure out how to kill this bastard. Fire. That's the answer. I had a plan. I had found gasoline, matches, and even an old couple sticks of dynamite. How lucky was I? Turns out back in the 1900s this town was famous for coal mining. There's even a couple of coal mines that weren't closed off. I thought I had it all figured out. So did that son of a bitch. It was nearing dusk yesterday, and I had everything laid out. It wasn't a super fancy trap or anything, but it would do the deed and kill this demon. At dusk, I was ready and waiting for it to come. I knew it would. It always does. My trap was set right in the outskirts of the woods. I wanted to keep the motel owner and the stowaway kid out of this. I found enough dynamite to make 4 small piles. I placed them in ring and connected them all with some spare cord that I found. Hopefully this would work. I sat in the middle of the circle and waited, my trusty rifle at my side. I also had multiple knives on me hidden beneath my shirt and in my boots. Soon I heard growling that seemed to be getting closer and closer. Then it stopped and all was quiet. I don't mean peaceful silence. I mean dead silence. No birds chirping or squirrels running around in the trees. It's like they knew what was coming and were trying to save themselves. Leaves start to crunch and twigs snap. The growling resumes, but it sounds like it's coming from all directions. I stood up and braced myself the best I could. Who can prepare you for the moment you must fight a beast descended from the fires of hell itself? Then it emerged from the woods. I cannot describe how horrifying this creature was. I wanted to close my eyes and curl up in a ball until this whole thing was over with. I almost did, but then I stopped myself and decided that I wouldn't let this beast harm any other people. I wasn't trying to play hero. I was trying to save myself. This creature was entombed in decaying yellow skin. Its glowing yellow eyes stared into mine, and I felt my bones shake. The Wendigo loomed over me. Its sharp fangs were leering at me, almost laughing, as if saying, "Ha, what now?" I snapped myself out of my fear-induced stupor and ran to the nearest pile of dynamite. I pulled my pack of matches out and tried to get one lit. My hands were shaking so bad that it took 3 tries. The Wendigo slowly stalked towards me on its towering legs. I dropped the match on the pile and waited for fireworks. No such luck. The match sputtered and died as it landed just to the side of the dynamite wick. My heart dropped. I was certainly doomed. I had it all planned out that I didn't expect anything to go wrong. I looked around for the patch of matches that had fallen out of my hand when the creature batted me aside with a swipe of its paw. Blackness. When I regain consciousness, I see the Wendigo peering over me. There's a long gash along my left leg, put there by its monstrous teeth. I groan and try to sit up. Soon, I find the beast on top of me, snarling and spitting in my face. I find one of the hunting knives I had hidden on me and plunge it as far as it'll go before crawling away. I look at the creature and find the hilt sticking from where its stomach should be. Grayish blue blood is oozing from the wound. The beast roars in pain. "Hey, what's going, Dash?" That sentence is cut off as the Wendigo lunges for Mason, the runaway kid. With a single swipe of his clawed hand, the creature tears into the kid's chest, chunks of flesh ripping away. The look on Mason's face will haunt me forever. It was pure fear and surprise. The poor kid never saw it coming. I scream in frustration as I try to get the nearest pile of dynamite. I reach it and frantically search the ground for a match and feel a minuscule sense of hope as I find one. I strike it against the nearest rock and toss it onto the pile. I stand up on my legs and groan as I hobble away. The force of the explosion pushes me to the ground. Despite the dull ringing in my ears, I can hear a blood-curdling shriek. I look into the flames and see the dancing figure of the hell creature. Red and orange engulf its body as it is burned. I lay down among the ferns and brush that coat the forest floor. I close my eyes and drift it off. You must be thinking by now that I killed it, that the Wendigo is dead. When I come to, I get up and make my way to the burned patch of land. I look around for any sign of a corpse, but find none, not even bones. I could have been naive and assumed that the ashes scattered on the ground were from the beast, but I knew better. It probably ran off back to where it came from and nursed its injuries. I know that there is a good possibility that it'll come back. Of course, I'll be long before that does happen. I have since made it back home. I am never going back to that cabin. Let it sit there and rot, a reminder of the constant sorrow that can lie in these woods among the beauty. Let it remind people of nature's dark side. I am thinking of having a memorial for Mason and Eleanor. Chip is okay. I had left him in the motel room before I embarked on the hunt. I couldn't lose him. He's the only family I have left. I am okay. I will be, at least until it comes again. This time, I will be ready. Thanks a lot for watching the video. Till the end, subscribe to Horror in Detail for more videos. Drop your suggestions in comment section.